I didn't expect Christmas dinner to end with me lying on the floor. One second, I was pulling out a chair, and the next, my stepdad's hand was on my shoulder, shoving hard enough to knock the breath out of me. He glared down and said, "That seat belongs to my real daughter. Get out." The room froze. No one moved, no one spoke. I stood up slowly, tasting metal, feeling the heat rise in my chest. What he didn't know was that before the night was over, I'd make sure this moment changed his life forever. I wish I could tell you that what happened at the Christmas table was sudden, that something inside him snapped without warning and caught everyone off guard. But families rarely fracture that way. They splinter quietly, years before the sound becomes loud enough to echo. I had lived under his roof since I was 13, ever since my mother married him after a fast, hopeful year she called her second chance. Maybe it was that for her. For me, it became a long lesson in how to disappear inside a house that no longer felt like mine. He never raised his voice, never needed to. His control lived in pauses, in looks that lingered too long, in comments about real family delivered casually, precisely when he knew they would cut deepest. My mother dismissed it every time. "He's trying. You're sensitive. Don't take it so personally." I heard those words so often they blended into the background, as constant as the old heater rattling in my room at night. By my 20s, I'd learned how to exist without being noticed. I knew which topics to avoid, how to answer questions without sounding defensive, how to keep my shoulders small. Holidays were the hardest. The house looked like it belonged in a catalog, garlands perfect, lights warm, music soft. But inside, everything felt brittle. His daughter Emily shone effortlessly in the space he carved out for her. She wasn't cruel, she didn't need to be. She simply belonged in a way I never did. And still, I kept showing up. Not for him, never for him, but for my mother. Some stubborn part of me believed that if I stayed long enough, if I kept choosing her, she would eventually choose me back. This Christmas was meant to be uneventful. Dinner, gifts, polite conversation, survival. I practiced neutral answers during the drive, measured my tone, prepared myself to be agreeable. The tension hit as soon as I stepped inside. He barely acknowledged me. My mom handed me a plate without looking up. Emily was already seated at the end of the table, in the chair I'd occupied every year since I was a teenager. I should have seen it then. I should have known what was coming. When he shoved me, it wasn't just my body that hit the floor. It was the last fragile belief I'd been protecting, the idea that silence could keep me safe. The quiet that followed wasn't comforting. It was the kind of silence that waits, that measures how much you'll endure to avoid making others uncomfortable. My mother gasped, but it wasn't the sound of alarm. It was embarrassment. She reached for a napkin, as if tidying the moment might erase it. "Ava, sweetie, just sit somewhere else," she murmured, eyes darting nervously. Emily focused on her plate, adjusting her bracelet, practiced at not intervening. I pushed myself up, palms stinging, heart pounding. He didn't step back. He loomed, hand still gripping the chair like a trophy. "I said what I said," he repeated calmly. "That seat is for my real daughter." The word real burned hotter than the shove. I smoothed my sweater, forced my voice steady. "You could have asked me to move." His mouth curved, pleased. "You don't listen unless someone makes it clear." That was the truth he'd never hidden. He wanted humiliation, not compliance. My mom rushed in again, laugh, trembling. "Let's not ruin Christmas. There's a chair by the window." Away from the table, away from belonging. I felt my pulse roar in my ears. For years, I told myself swallowing moments like this was easier than facing them, that peace meant endurance. Standing there, looking at all of them, I felt something settle into place. Not anger, not sadness. Certainty. I walked past the window seat and into the kitchen. My hands shook as I grabbed my coat. My mom followed, whispering, "Don't make a scene." I turned before I could stop myself. "He pushed me in front of you, and you're worried about a scene?" She froze, words gone. Behind her, I could hear his low laughter, Emily responding like nothing had happened, like I never mattered. That was the moment something inside me snapped cleanly. No drama, no tears. I told her, softly enough that only she heard, "You will regret this." It wasn't a threat, it was a decision. I drove home with my hands locked on the wheel, Christmas lights streaking past like blurred paint. I didn't cry, there was nothing left to spill, just a cold, focused quiet, the kind that comes when you stop bargaining with pain. My phone buzzed again and again. Mom, Emily, Mom. I ignored it. Let them sit with the silence they taught me to accept. When I got home, the kitchen light was the only one on. I stood there replaying the shove, the floor, my mother's whisper, "real daughter." The words clung to me. I made tea just to feel warmth, steam curling upward as resolve settled deeper. He wanted to remind me of my place, to shrink me until I vanished from their picture. Fine, I would disappear on my terms. I opened my laptop, not to vent, not to accuse, but to look. Old documents, bills, repairs, accounts my mother had asked me to organize over the years. He loved pretending he carried the household. He never acknowledged how much rested quietly on my hands. I reviewed everything calmly. Missed payments, debt shifted into my mother's name, responsibilities ignored. Patterns became clear once I stopped excusing them. By midnight, I knew exactly what needed to happen. Not revenge, protection. I closed the laptop, exhaled, and went to bed knowing the balance was about to change. He woke up at sunrise. I know because the first call came at 6:12 a.m. I didn't answer. I was standing at my kitchen counter, pouring cereal into a bowl, the morning light brushing across the tile floor like nothing extraordinary was happening. My phone kept buzzing against the wood. His name, then Mom's, then his again. By the time I finished breakfast, there were 9 missed calls. By the time I finished my breakfast, there were 17. By the time I tied my shoes to leave home, the number had grown to 26. I didn't check a single voicemail. Instead, I drove to a small office in the north end of the city, a place I'd visited only once before, years ago, when I helped my mom sort out a minor issue with her insurance. The attorney there remembered me instantly. He had kind eyes and a voice like gravel softened with time. "What brings you in today, Ava?" I slid a folder on his desk. "I need help making sure my mom understands what she's financially tied to and what she's not." He opened the folder, flipping through the documents I had organized overnight. Statements she had covered, repairs she had paid for, maintenance he had ignored while insisting everything was his responsibility. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just a long, steady trail of a woman carrying weight. A man pretended he lifted. The attorney exhaled slowly. "This is a lot. Does your mother know any of this?" "No," I said, because he never let her see the full picture, and she never asked. He nodded thoughtfully. "And what do you want to do?" "I want her to know the truth. I want her to understand what she's been protecting at my expense." He tapped his pen twice on the folder. "We can request a meeting, neutral ground, lay out the information calmly. Nothing confrontational. Confrontation already happened last night," I said quietly. "This is clarity." He nodded again. "You're not trying to destroy him." "No," I said, "just the version of him she thinks she knows." We scheduled the meeting for that afternoon. When I walked out of the office, the cold air hit my face like a baptism. My phone vibrated again, this time with a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring out. When the voicemail icon popped up, I pressed play. It was my mom. "Ava, please call me. He's upset. He said you're trying to cause trouble. I don't know what happened last night, but we need to talk." I deleted it. Not out of anger, out of exhaustion. She still didn't understand that what happened last night wasn't a beginning, it was a culmination. By noon, the missed calls had climbed to 33. I spent the rest of the morning at a small cafe across from the attorney's office, warming my hands around a cup of coffee, watching frost melt down the windows. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for the next wound. I was preparing for truth. At 2, my mom arrived at the attorney's office alone. She looked tired, her scarf slightly crooked, her eyes rimmed with red, like she'd been crying for hours. She walked toward me cautiously, like I might disappear if she approached too fast. "Ava," she whispered, "why are we here?" I gestured to the conference room. "You'll understand in a moment." When the attorney spread the documents out across the polished table, she stared at them with the kind of confusion that slowly turns into fear. Her fingers trembled as she traced dates and amounts she had completely forgotten about. "Why? Why did he put this in my name?" she asked. The attorney answered gently. "Legally, he couldn't qualify. Your credit carried these obligations. You've been responsible for most of the household expenses." She blinked rapidly. "But he told me he handled everything." I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The attorney continued. "Nothing here is illegal, but it does show a long pattern of financial dependence that has left you vulnerable without realizing it." Mom leaned back, hand covering her mouth. I had no idea. That was the moment right there, when the narrative she'd clung to all these years finally cracked. I saw it in her eyes, the loyalty she had defended, the tone she used to silence me, the excuses she recited on autopilot. All of it collided with the reality sitting right in front of her. And then her phone buzzed on the table. She flinched, turning its screen up. 37 missed calls, all from him. She didn't answer. For a long moment the room was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. Finally, she looked at me. "Last night, when he pushed you, Ava, I'm so sorry. I didn't think it was that serious. I thought you two just argued." I shook my head. "He shoved me to the floor, Mom, in front of everyone, and you told me not to make a scene." She winced, like the words themselves were knives. "I didn't know what to do," she whispered. "He gets angry when I confront him. I thought keeping things calm was better." Calm for who? My voice didn't rise, but it cut through the room like glass. Her eyes filled. "I never wanted you to feel unwanted." "But I did," I said, "for years, and yesterday wasn't the first time. It was just the first time it was undeniable." The attorney excused himself to give us privacy. When the door clicked shut, Mom folded her arms over herself, like she was trying to keep from breaking apart. "What happens now?" she whispered. "That's up to you," I said. "But whatever you decide, it has to be with full knowledge, not the story he tells you." Another buzz. Her phone lit up. 41 missed calls. She silenced it without answering. When we walked out of the office together, the winter sun was already sinking, casting a long shadow behind us on the sidewalk. I expected her to leave, to return to him, like she always did, held in place by habit and fear, but she didn't. She stood beside me, breathing into her scarf, staring at her shoes like she was gathering pieces of herself she hadn't touched in years. Then she said quietly, "Ava, I want to go home, not to him, to my sisters, just for tonight." It wasn't triumph, it wasn't revenge, it was the beginning of accountability. As we turned toward the parking lot, my phone buzzed once more. I looked down. 47 missed calls. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat, I just felt relief. He finally knew I wasn't playing by his script anymore, and tomorrow he would have to live in a world where I no longer collapsed under his voice, his expectations, his version of family. A world where the truth had a seat at the table, even if he tried to push it away. My mom stayed with her sister for several days. I didn't check on her constantly, didn't hover or try to direct her choices. For once, she wasn't leaning on him or expecting me to smooth things over. She was simply sitting with the truth, and that was more than anything I'd seen her do in years. Meanwhile, the calls from him slowed, then stopped. No apologies, no explanations, just silence thick enough to confirm everything we had uncovered. He wasn't looking for understanding, he was looking for control, and without an audience, he had nothing to say. Mom asked me to meet her for coffee later that week. When she walked in, she looked smaller but steadier, like someone who'd finally stepped out of a long, cold shadow. "I read everything again," she said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "I can't believe how blind I was." "You weren't blind, you were tired, and he counted on that." She nodded slowly. "I want things to be different. I want to learn how to stand up for myself and for you." It wasn't a perfect apology, it wasn't a perfect moment, but it was honest, and that mattered more than anything she could have said at the Christmas table. As she talked about next steps, practical ones, gentle ones, I felt a strange lightness bloom in my chest. Not victory, not even closure, just the quiet relief of finally seeing my mother choose herself. And if she could do that, then maybe finally she could choose me too. I didn't walk away from that Christmas to punish anyone. I walked away because I finally understood that protecting myself wasn't disloyal, it was necessary. Families don't heal through silence or endurance. They heal when someone is brave enough to break the pattern. For us, it started with one truth, laid on a table where I was never allowed to sit. If this story reminds you of something you've lived through, share it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.